Hi, everybody. Okay, this is working. Yeah, thanks so much for coming to the workshop today. I'm going to be telling you more about Story. My name is Jacob. I'm on the DevRel team at Story. And before I begin, I just want to give you a brief introduction. I know some of you have checked out our booth, and thanks for coming. But Story is trying to solve the problem of creative IP. Right now, the current legal system for creative IP is antiquated. It is old and inefficient. If you were to try and register your IP, it'd be very difficult to do that unless you're a big player like Disney. And if you have if you had a lot of money, access to lawyers, time, you'd be able to go about registering your IP. But we want to make it easier for the smaller creators to do so. And more importantly, we're doing that by we have our own L1 blockchain, the world's IP blockchain. And we want to make it easier for smart creators to do that by just running a transaction on the blockchain to register your IP. And when you do that, attach license terms to your IP, so you can communicate to other people how you want them to use that IP. So if they can create derivatives of it, how they can use it commercially, what is the commercial revenue share. So these are all terms that you can set directly on our protocol. And so the workshop today is going to be covering how to actually do that in code using the TypeScript SDK. So before I dive in, I just want to mention that all of this is also available on our documentation at docs.story.foundation. And actually, if a few of you want to follow along while I'm doing this, you totally can. If you go to our docs and just click on either one of these two links, you'll have access to the code that I'm going to go over. So it's all available for you. And if you want to, do what I do during this workshop, you can afterwards as well. All right, so let's just dive into it. So in my cursor here, and thanks Cursor. Cursor's going to be helping me out today. It's been super helpful. I'm going to show you how to register your IP using the SDK. So if you go to this tutorial and you scroll down a little bit past all this explanation stuff, you should see a copy and pastable command to install your dependencies. So you're going to install the core SDK. Pinata is what I'm going to be using to upload files to IPFS. But you could use whatever you want, and VM as well for just communicating to the blockchain. So let's go ahead and just dive into it. So I'm going to first set up my Story config. So in order to do that, I'm just going to, because I think it's really boring and it doesn't really have to do exactly with Story, I'm just going to go ahead and copy some code just to skip past the boring stuff. So in my .env, I have already set my wallet's private key and also a JSON web token I got from the Pinata website so that we can upload some data to IPFS later when we're registering our IP. So in my code now, I have my private key, imported from my env file, and I've created an account from that private key. And so now we're going to quickly set up the Story config. Again, this is some boring stuff, but it is important, obviously. We're going to put our account right here that we just created. Cursor is suggesting some things which are helpful, but I'm not going to do that just so I can show you all. And a RPC provider URL. Now this is just, oh look, it actually gave us too much. The RPC provider URL is just a basic one that we provide. I actually have this set up in a utils file here. And if you're curious, all these other files that are on the left here, these are all different examples of registering IP on Story. So whether it's a song, whether it's an image or something else, or even an example of registering derivative IP, you can also view that on the left here. And again, that's all available on our documentation. But I have, as you can see here, my RPC provider URL is set. So I'm just importing that into this file. And then lastly, I'm just going to specify the chain ID, which is actually called Iliad. We are currently in our first testnet phase, which is called Iliad. The next one, our whole engineering team is actually working on in office right now. That's going to be called Odyssey, and that's coming out in a couple weeks with a bunch of really cool updates to our royalty module and a bunch of other stuff I can describe at the end. But right now, the current chain is Iliad. So that's what we're calling our testnet. And we're also really excited for mainnet, which will be coming in a couple months. Okay, so now that we have our config set up, we can initialize our client. And that's just going to be, as you see on the right here, Story client.new client, and we're going to pass in our config. So now we are ready to actually interact with Story. Now that we have our client. So before we actually go ahead and register our IP, we need to set some metadata. So it's really important to us to track, attribution data. Who created this IP? Was it, and what actually is it? Is it a book? Is it music? What is the IP that we're actually registering? And in order to help us out, on our docs, we have a page called the IP metadata standard. And this is there to help all of you developers walk through how to actually set proper metadata on your IP assets. So the title, you can imagine this as the title of your book, a description of it. Is it music? Is it, is it written text? What are some of the relationships associated with this IP? So how does it relate to other IP that's registered on the chain? You can set a watermark image, media, like let's say, this is a song, you could put the song asset under this, certain attributes like rarity, things like that. But you can also check this out on your own if you would like. So we're gonna try and set up some metadata associated with our IP. So if we go to another line here, we can do, as it says on the right, we can set some metadata. And we're going to use a helper function in our SDK called generate IP metadata. This is going to make it so that we can provide the metadata that we want, and then it's automatically going to fill in all the others as empty fields or empty arrays. So it's a great helper for us. So the title, we can just say this is my book IP. So just for this example, we'll say that I'm going to register a book I wrote as IP on Story. And then I'll add a little description that just says, like, I don't know, this book is really cool. I don't know what else to put, so we'll put that. And then we'll just put some attributes just to fill in the blanks here. So again, we'll just say key. This is just going to be a rarity trait. And you'll actually notice it is similar to NFT metadata, but we'll get to that in a second as well. And we'll just say this is legendary. Yeah. Sure, yeah. Is this better for everyone to see? Awesome. Okay. All right, cool. Okay, yeah, I spelled it right, thank God. Okay. So as we go on to the next step, now we're going to set some NFT metadata. So on Story, when you register IP, how it works is you take an NFT that exists on Story Protocol and you register that as IP. Now this NFT represents ownership over that piece of IP. So this is really interesting because now we're sort of unlocking DeFi, what we're calling IPFi, around IP. So the buying and selling of ownership of IP assets. So let's say you have a piece of IP that's earning revenue, like my book, for example. If someone were to reference that book in their book and register their book as a derivative of mine, you can almost imagine we're creating a sort of IP graph. And when that derivative work earns revenue, I would also earn revenue since I created the original work, and that royalty would flow up the graph automatically because of our royalty module. And I own the NFT to that original work, so I would get those royalties, but it's really interesting, if I were to maybe sell that NFT on a secondary market, whoever bought that NFT from me would now earn all revenue from that work. So you can imagine what it would mean to maybe buy and sell the rights to Mickey Mouse. Whoever bought that NFT, there's a lot of speculation around the pricing of that because they would earn the revenues for that IP. So that is why we have, that is the NFT importance on Story, is again, it represents the ownership of that IP asset. And we will mint an NFT in a second, but that's what we have to set some metadata first. So we're going to do that right now. We're going to say const metadata equals, and we're going to set a name. Now this all just follows, unlike the IP metadata, which follows our IPA metadata standard, the NFT metadata is all just basic Open Zeppelin traditional metadata standards that are used to on any other chain. So the name, we'll just say this represents ownership of my book IP. We'll also just set a description saying this is a cool book. And then the image, I'm just going to copy and paste an image that I used in my tutorial. This, I believe, actually this link is a helpful website to use to randomly generate images. So it's helpful for the purposes of a demo. Okay, cool. So now that we've set all of our metadata, we're going to scroll on to the next part, and we're actually going to upload this metadata to IPFS. For the sake of this demo, I already have a file here called upload.json to IPFS. This is just a, again, basic script to use Pinata to upload our metadata to IPFS. And again, this part is kind of boring, so I'm going to skip past this because it's not entirely story related. So I will post that right here. Now, what this is going to do is, again, use that upload function to take our IP metadata we set, upload it to IPFS. It's going to give us back a hash. And we're also, for later, you'll see in a second here, we're also just going to straight up hash that object so that we can pass it into the function and register our IP on Story. Okay, so now we're getting to the actual cool part, which is finally the registration. So now that we have all of our metadata set, we're going to go to our line down here, and we're going to do the process of registering. Now, this process has a few things involved. The first is we need to actually mint an NFT again to represent ownership of that IP asset. And then we're going to register that NFT as an IP asset, and it's going to go into the IP asset registry on Story. And when we do that, we're also going to pass in licensing data or license terms associated with that IP. So if you actually go to our docs, and scroll down to where it says programmable IP license, this is the license that we use on Story. So just like any other traditional legal document that exists in the world today, our programmable IP license is a license that our legal team has drafted, and it's based off US copyright law and able to be upheld in court the same way that any other legal document would. This license exists actually off-chain, again, just like a normal legal document. And you know what? I'll actually show it here. If I click on this link, this will bring us to a GitHub link, which actually shows the license. So as you can see, if I were to scroll down here, I'm not going to lie, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't understand this too well. But if we scroll down here, you can see there's certain terms like territory, channels of distribution, expiration, there's an attribution clause, derivatives clause. All of these are legal clauses that specify how people can use your IP. And what we've done on Story is we've taken these terms and mapped them on chain in our Solidity smart contracts on our protocol. So when you go to register IP, you're just going to pass in certain data. And if we go back to our docs, it'll actually show you what that struct looks like. If we go to pill terms, you can see this is actually what that legal document looks like on chain. So these pill terms, again, have a derivatives clause, has a commercial clause, and this is enforced directly by our protocol. So when someone, for example, pays a derivative or a grandchild IP asset, the protocol can enforce that those royalty payments flow up the chain so that the original author earns revenue. So again, it is all enforced by the protocol directly. So let's go back to our tutorial here. And first, again, we have to mint that NFT to represent ownership of this. And so I'm gonna use Cursor to save the day and input that code here. So again, just for the purposes of this demo, I have a mint NFT function. This is just using VM to call into an example smart contract that I've deployed. It's going to mint it to a certain address. In this case, I'm just going to mint it to my admin address, and also a URI field, which is just all that's going to do is pass in the IPFS link with the NFT IPFS hash. So all this metadata is going to be set on the NFT. Now, I do want to quickly pause here. You may be thinking, well, it's kind of inconvenient to have to mint an NFT and then afterwards run a transaction to register that NFT as an IP asset. And I would agree with you. And so what we've done is we actually have another part of this tutorial, section 5B, which mints an NFT and registers all in the same transaction. This is actually using a utility contract called the Story Protocol Gateway. And this is, again, deployed in our protocol. It's a utility contract that does both at the same time. So I'm just going to quickly scroll down here to show you. I'm not going to do it in this workshop, but there is a function called mint and register IP asset with pill terms. I'm going to increase the font here maybe so you can see it better. But this will do both at the same time. If you want a little bit more custom code, you can deploy your own NFT contract, and that's what I did for this workshop, just to show you a different example. But again, you can follow that if you want as well. Okay, so I'm going to scroll back up to where we were. And now that we have our NFT, I'm going to say const response equals client. So we're going to use our client we set up earlier, .ipasset.register IP, and attach pill terms right here. And so there's a few things we have to pass in here. The first is the NFT contract address of where that NFT came from or where it was minted from. That is just NFT contract address. I'm importing that from my utils file here. You can see I've preset that so that we didn't have to do that in this workshop. And that exists right here. Okay, so now we're going to go back to our file. And let's go back to ETHGlobal here. And I'm going to set also the token ID. So this is just very simply the token ID that we just minted. And then, like I promised earlier, we're also going to set some licensing terms on our IP. So we're going to actually just for this demo, we're going to say the pill type is pill_type.non-commercial remix. And this is actually just one of the flavors that we support. So we understand that there's a ton of different combinations of this license terms that you could set. But for your convenience, we've created some flavors, or our legal team has created some popular flavors that you can use to, again, set license terms on your IP. So one of them is non-commercial social remixing. This is for, when you don't truly care what happens to your IP, you want others to be able to, create derivatives of it, but you don't want people to commercialize it. So if I had a image and I wanted someone else to be able to create infinite derivatives of it, but not put it on a t-shirt and sell it, I would set some non-commercial social remixing terms. But further below, we have another flavor called commercial use. This is a merch example. So if I want to say, you know what, if you want to use my image, or you want to use my Pikachu that I've created because I'm an artist and I've created Pikachu, and you have to pay me 100 USDC every time you put that on a t-shirt and sell it, I can set that in my licensing terms right here. And so just going back to this example, we're just going to use non-commercial social remixing, which says, okay, you know what, anyone can actually use this, but they can't commercialize it. Okay, so this function also expects a few other parameters that really don't matter because we are just using the non-commercial social remixing. These terms are used for, again, a commercial setting where you want someone to pay you when when they actually use your IP. Now, the last part of this is that IP metadata, and I'm actually going to go ahead again because this is boring and I want to make sure that I have time for some questions. This is some IP metadata that you can set. So this is an IP metadata URI. All this stuff is just going to be set. Again, I think you probably don't want to hear me explain this, but you could just go in our docs and read that. This is just that we make sure we're setting proper metadata on our IP and NFT when we go to register it. And then the last thing here is we're just going to set some transaction options to say we want to wait for the transaction to complete so that we can access some data after it so I can show all of you. Now this is giving me an error here. I believe I can just say as number and that should fix it. All right, awesome. And then we're just going to console.log some information after, and I'm going to show you this live on our Explorer. So if the, let's see, this is giving me an issue here. What does this say? Oh, I didn't say await. Oops. Okay, so if I await this call. So if the demo gods are with me today, this should work. Let's see what happens here. So it's minting a new NFT. It's going to now start, registering that IP on the story. And when this is completed, it'll give us a link to our Explorer that should look something like this. This is a Azuki image that I've registered earlier. Obviously, I'm not the author of this. This is all in a testnet environment. But if I was the owner of an Azuki, it would come up right here, and then some extra data that I'll show you in a second. So let's see. Here we go. So it worked. Awesome. So we can actually go to our Explorer page. We should see that this should refresh in a second. So let's see if it actually comes up. All right, so actually one thing I'll show you here is on the right side, you can see the license terms. So one awesome thing about Story is we're trying to improve the transparency of IP licensing. So we are currently working on something called the Creator Hub, which is a environment for you to search for IP and find IP that you want to use in your work so that you can mint a license from it, you can create derivatives with it, all that fun stuff. Okay, so here is our NFT. Now, again, this is just a random image that was generated from that URL, but you can see the name, you can see the image here. Here are some NFT details, and we can actually view the NFT URI that we set earlier, so we can see it's all working. Some IP details, I'll zoom in so you can see. Here we go. So this is just some extra metadata associated with the NFT, and it has correctly worked. So there is the demo. Now, one other thing I want to show you before I open this up to some questions is I was actually experimenting earlier with a lot of people had come up to us and said, well, we're actually really interested in registering music. We think it'd be really cool to register the stems of a song or a sped up version of the song or a remix of a song. So earlier I was actually experimenting with it, and I found actually our engineering team really quickly updated it so that the Explorer supports music as well. So if I actually were to go in here and let me just copy this that I was working on earlier and paste it into our tutorial here, just like this. I'm going to run this script again, and hopefully what should happen is this song that was created, actually, forget where it was created. It was created on, Suno. So Suno is like a AI platform where you can generate songs. I use that to create a new song, and I'm going to now register it as IP on Story. And so here we go. Here is the Explorer link. It might take a second for this to actually load, but when it does, we should see that we can actually play the song directly on our Explorer. And again, the idea is that this would come up on our hub So you could go and search for songs that you really like, and you can mint a license for it and then use it in your own work. Let's say a TikTok video, an Instagram video, whatever you want. Or you could tinker with the song. So take a part of it or speed it up or slow it down. And then you could register that as a derivative. And any revenue that you earn on that derivative song would have to be paid back to the original creator based on the license terms that were set. So if we were to refresh the page here, let's see if this actually comes up. And this was done not actually a couple hours ago. So we'll see if it goes through. Let's see, it's still thinking. Here we go. So now I don't know if it's actually going to play. I'm afraid to blow the speakers off or something. But you can see there's actually a song now. So you can see there's a song on our Explorer now. And so again, the idea is that you'd be able to search for songs. And yeah, so thanks for that. This was the 20 minutes of the workshop. And any questions, I'm happy to answer. Sure.
Does it support video?
Does this support video?
Yeah.
I actually don't know. I would assume if it's like an animated PNG, it would support that. Actually, I know it does support that. I don't know if it supports MP4 files, but that's an interesting thing. I'll test that after. Yeah. Yeah.
This may be a little bit delayed, but what happens if I try to register something that is not my property, right? Like,
Yep.
maybe I want to use use an NFT, yes,
Yep.
right? Maybe I try to use that one as my property. What happens in that scenario?
That's a really good question. So what we do is we support, well, there's two sectors to this. The first is we support what's called a on-chain dispute module. So what we're trying to do is make it so that most IP can be disputed directly on-chain. Now we're currently in the process and we're working with third-party dispute mechanisms or dispute apps to figure out how that process would work. But we want to make sure that most IP can be disputed on-chain. And again, that's to make things more efficient. But we also understand that a lot of disputing needs to happen off-chain. We need humans, we need courts. We don't want to overwrite the legal system, we just want to make it more efficient. And so in the same way that right now, if we had a license between each other and I violated that license or I violated your IP, you could take me to court over that license. The same is true of the programmable IP license or what we call the PIL. You would be able to take me to court and we would be able to talk about the arbitration in the same exact way. But of course, we want to make sure that most disputes happen on chain.
But what if you don't know my identity? Let's say you created an NFT and I'm taking your asset and trying to sell it and you don't know who I am, just a valid address. How would you sue me?
Yeah, sorry, do you mind repeating that question? I started to hear.
Let's say you're the creator of a Suzuki NFT and I steal your asset or NFT and
Yep.
make money out of it.
Yep.
And you don't know who I am. I just
Right.
know the valid address. So how would you sue?
Yeah, that's also a really good question. So one thing that's associated with IP infringement, obviously, is the search and discoverability of disputed IPs or IPs that are not using your IP in a good way. Story is not trying to solve that specific problem. We do think that in the same way that for example, Netflix made media content much more available, it also at the same time reduced pirating. And so we believe that if we are able to make IP more accessible, it will reduce IP maluse. We believe that most people want to go about IP in the legal way. People want to register IP in a legal way. And so we're trying to make that more efficient. However, if you were to make any significant amount of revenue and that were to come to my attention as the creator of that, again, I would be able to take you to court over that or dispute it on chain or any of the above. Yeah.
So if I were to write a book and I were to register a story,
Yeah.
and own the story, and then someone were to take that book and write that book and publish that book, like the legal terms that you showed us should allow me to sue them.
Right. So I believe you're saying, what if I were to what if you were to register your book on Story, but someone else then just wrote that exact same book and sold it? Yeah. So in that, it would be the same in that case. So in the same way that, I guess, yeah, the programmable IP license.
I think the question was, are the legal terms legal enforceable? I suppose yes, and the answer is yes. So the license that gets generated on chain is obviously parameters, but you can render that to a legal document that you can enforce outside. But does that like map to the U.S. IP system? Yeah, it's based on the same thing. And made with lawyers, made with law firms. So if I were to register my IP on it today,
Yeah, and one thing I do want to add to that, thanks Andrea for answering that question. Yeah, so while we are focused on creative IP, obviously we do understand that there is other types of copyright, patents, that kind of thing. The programmable IP license is just the first example of what we're calling a license template on our protocol. A license template, again, it's just a set of terms that I showed you in that legal document. And the pill is mostly focused on creative IP, but the protocol does support adding other license templates that are maybe more specific to patents or other types of IP. It's just that it natively supports the pill, but yeah, it's permissionless. So theoretically, you'd be able to add a license template that supports more, different types of copyright. Yeah.
So in one of the examples you were showing with a generative AI song, how is story handling Gen AI, given that, at least in the US, we can't copyright in this generative AI?
So sorry, do you mind repeating that? It's hard to hear up here.
No, no worries. So in one of the examples you showed a solo song with
Mhm.
the generative AI
Yeah.
in the content. Currently, legally, you cannot copyright generative AI content. So how is the contract?
Oh.
Like, how do you tell the story, hey, this is Gen AI?
Right, I totally hear what you're saying now. Yeah, so the question is, I used Sumo AI to generate a song, but generative AI songs are not necessarily copyrightable. So there are a few things associated with that. Actually, I'll go back to the pill terms here. Actually, I'll go back to the metadata standard here. So there's a few things in our metadata standard we've actually done to talk about this. The first one is if you scroll down, there are something called robot terms, which says, okay, this is training data, and I don't want you to train on certain data. So I don't want this specific agent to train on this data that I'm providing. A lot of LLMs right now, what they're doing is they're using certain training data that are not licensed, and they're using that to produce certain outputs. So, for example, Sumo AI is using pre-existing songs and training on it and producing certain output that is not paying original creators in order to do that. And so what we want to do with Story is make it so that training data is more licensable and easier to recognize, so that Sumo is, that when it produces certain output and that song, for example, earns much revenue, we want to make it so that that training data that it trained on also earns a cut of that after the fact. So we're trying to make it so that both the input and output of AI, whether it's Sumo AI or something else, is licensed and is more easily accessible. Yeah.
One more question.
Sure. Yeah. Oh wait. Yeah.
Can we use DNS to name individual IP, each individual piece of IP?
Yeah. I don't think at the moment. I think we are working with an ENS service to potentially do that, but it's not live at the moment. One other question. Yeah.
There's like a separate blockchain for story, but what was the reason for creating a separate blockchain?
Really good question. So the question is, why did we make our own separate blockchain and not maybe deploy on another blockchain? So the reason for that was, we didn't want to. Actually, only a few months ago, we had our protocol deployed on Sepolia, and we wanted to actually eventually deploy on ETH mainnet. The issue was that, or one of the biggest issues was gas concerns. Chains are not able to handle the extensive IP graphs that we want to support. When you bring into the picture absurd amounts of remixing and derivatives, you could imagine a graph that's thousands of layers deep and extends very wide. And this is one thing, but when you start talking about automated royalty flows too, where let's say a child that's thousands of layers deep earns revenue and it flows all the way up the chain, that was just not compatible on existing solutions. And so Story is a purpose-built chain using precompiles and other improvements, both at the execution layer and consensus layer, to make it so that IP graphs are more efficient. And so something like that is handled more properly.